wherever you're joining, we welcome you to the webinar that covers the sector deep dive on plastics and waste management, which is a part of the Gsma Innovation Fund for Digital Urban Services. So just to let you know, we would be having consecutive 4 webinar sessions starting from today, and today is the first of the series that covers plastics and waste management. On the next slide, you will see today's agenda. So before I dive into the agenda, just to let you know, in case you haven't met me, I'm Dulip Tilakaratna. I'm the Senior Market Engagement Manager for the GSMA Climate Tech Program and based in Sri Lanka. So welcome. So today's agenda, we would run for the next hour, is broken down here. We'll have a short introduction about the GSMA for those who are unfamiliar with us. And then we will cover a little bit of an overview on the GSMA Innovation Fund and move into the topic today, which is plastics and waste management. And just to go deep in and understand what are the kind of contextual reasons that we looked at digital tech use in plastics and waste management, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are. And then we are very excited to have Michael from Clean City Africa talking about their project in Zimbabwe. So we look forward to that. And we plan to have about 15 minutes at the end for a very engaging Q&A session. So on the next slide, when I'm talking about the Q&A session, just to let you know, on your screen, you should see there's 2 chat options or chat related options. The first one you can see, or the one pointed here, is the questions and answers. So during this call, for the first 45 minutes roughly, we'll use the chat option where you can see the chat with everyone. So in case you have any questions, you want to clarify anything, or you want to ask any questions as we go along, you can use the chat. And especially when Michael is speaking from Clean City Africa in his presentation, any questions you want to ask while he speaks, you can feel free to add them on the chat. Whereas when we move to the Q&A session or the question and answer session, we use the Q&A option. And one last point there, in case you have questions now itself that you want to be posted at the Q&A, feel free to use the Q&A now itself. So that's all on logistics. So about the GSMA, if you haven't worked with us before, we are the Mobile Industry Association. We work with almost 750 mobile operators and around 400 associate members. And we do have events, physical and virtual ones, that convene around almost or more than 200,000 people globally. And we are the first sector to commit to SDGs on a global scale. So all these efforts of Mobile for Development is also contributing to our SDG contribution overall. And I can answer very quickly. All these sessions are recorded, so you can have the recording as well. And we can move to the next slide. And within GSMA, we belong to the Mobile for Development Department. And within Mobile for Development, or M4D as we are well known, we drive innovation in digital tech to reduce inequalities in our world, to understand where digital tech can play a role. And we have multiple programs in M4D. When you can access our website, again, you would see what each of these programs are contributing to on a very thematic way. And M4D overall unlocks the private sector action to launch and scale transformative digital tech solutions. And we can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, in M4D, we have multiple programs. And for this innovation fund, we have 2 programs coming together, and they are our digital utilities program that support urban resilience in low and middle income countries. And they do this by enabling access to essential utility services through digital solutions. And along with the digital utilities program, we have our clean tech or clean tech known previously, climate tech now program that unlocks the power of digital technology to create a low carbon and climate resilience future. So the way we work, if we break it down into activities, we could list it down as it is on the slide. So we look at how we can de-risk or catalyze innovation. We can look at what research we need to conduct into understanding a specific problem and look at what sort of partnerships we can facilitate, bring people together, either virtually or previously physically, in many occasions. And where necessary, we look at technical advisory options for multiple stakeholders or bring some experts from the industry or across board for our events and sessions. So that's the broader M4D and within the programs that contribute to the Innovation Fund. And in the next slide, I would like to invite my colleague, Matt Wilson, who's the Insights Director for the Climate Tech Program, to take us through an overview of the Innovation Fund and dive deep into the plastics topic. Over to you, Matt.
Great. Thank you, Dilip, for that introduction. And it's a pleasure to speak to everyone. For those of you that have seen some of the documentation on the Innovation Fund, you'll know that plastics and waste management is a new sector for us. But Mobile for Development has over a decade of experience running innovation funds on a multitude of topics. And our approach has always been to fund projects that are inclusive, that have clear socio-economic impact, and are also working towards commercial sustainability and have the potential to reach users at scale. So the current round of the Gsma Innovation Fund, which we've announced last month, is the Gsma Innovation Fund for Digital Urban Services. And the fund seeks to test, scale, and extract insights from innovative urban services that are both inclusive and impactful. So you might be asking why the focus on digital urban services? Urban services such as energy, water, sanitation, and also plastics and waste management are essential to the well-being of city dwellers and the resilience of cities, and particularly amidst a changing climate. And while there's been a historic rise in mobile connectivity in low and middle income countries, and particularly in cities and urban areas, we know that billions of people still lack access to these basic services. And with rapidly expanding informal settlements across Africa and Asia, where 90% of global urban growth between now and 2050 is going to be concentrated, water shortages, unsanitary conditions, unreliable power, and inadequate waste management could remain a defining reality for many people. So to tackle these challenges, we really believe that local innovators have a really important role to play in leveraging digital technology and working with mobile operators and the public sector to deliver sustainable and equitable services. So through the Innovation Funds, we aim to demonstrate how digital technology, including mobile, can support and scale the delivery of these urban services to underserved populations. We want to get a deeper understanding of the socio-economic, commercial, and the environmental and climate impact of digital urban services. We want to grow our understanding of the business and partnership models that are required to enable digital urban services to be adopted at scale. And then we want to explore how partnerships with mobile operators and other technology companies can help improve the scale and the sustainability of these digital urban services. So the ways that we'll do that, or I should say the support that we're going to provide to grantees are going to include grant funding between 100,000 and 250,000 to support projects over 15 to 18 months. With a matching fund requirement. We provide boot camps and online clinics. That includes human-centered design and usability testing. We'll provide learning exchange opportunities with other grantees and networking opportunities with other GSMA partners. We have a team that's going to provide monitoring and evaluation support to build evidence of socioeconomic impact and also to promote product improvement. Tulip mentioned that we're well connected and we have lots of partners. So in the mobile sector, so we'll also facilitate relationships with mobile operators in your market and public sector organizations where relevant. And then we also want to increase your visibility and raise your profile to potential investors and partners. And we'll do that by profiling the work that you're doing through GSMA publications, social media, and events. Hopefully everyone who's joined the webinar has had a chance to review the terms and conditions and the frequently asked questions, which covers the eligibility criteria for the Innovation Fund. But just to highlight very quickly that the key eligibility criteria for the fund is number one, that you're a startup, small to medium-sized private sector company or social enterprise, that you can demonstrate the long-term sustainability and scalability of the innovation beyond the lifespan of the grant. And then third, that you have active users and revenue in at least one eligible lower middle income market. And we want to highlight that the following types of organizations are not eligible to apply to the Innovation Fund. Governments or approved government agencies, mobile network operators, university or academic organizations, or startup accelerators and incubators. But we do want to say that demonstrating how you'll partner with those types of organizations is certainly encouraged. And then in terms of geography, the focus is on low and middle income countries in Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, but some exclusions apply. So as I said, please make sure you see our terms and conditions. And then finally, just to highlight some of the Innovation Fund key dates. We've now, about 1 month ago, we announced the fund. We had our launch webinar last week, which some of you may have joined. And this week we've started to kick off our sector deep dives. So the important dates for you to remember are the 2nd of July is when applications close. And then from the 2nd of August to the 5th of November, the shortlisted applicants will submit a full project proposal, including technical proposal, a project implementation plan, and budget. So the real date to keep in the back of your mind is 2nd July, and we hope to receive your applications by then. So now what I'd like to do is just to give you a bit of an introduction to plastic and waste management from the GSMA's perspective. Now, if you joined the session last week, this might be a little bit repetitive in that we covered it, but I just wanted to go a little bit deeper, share our insights into our understanding of the challenge and the opportunity, and sort of tell you how our learning agenda has evolved. So over the last year, the climate tech team and the digital utilities team have both been involved with research projects that have helped us understand the plastic and waste management challenge, but also exploring the role of digital technology and the role that it plays to address mismanaged waste in ways that create environmental and social value. If you'd like to see our recently published report on plastic recycling, I might ask one of my colleagues to include a link in the chat section so that you can see that the research that's informed our approach to plastics, at least. So why do we see plastics and broader waste management as a challenge for urban areas in low and middle income countries? So for starters, the global communities predicted that over the next 30 years, by 2050, the total amount of waste generated in Africa is going to triple, and in Asia it's going to double. And in many of the cities found in this region, formal waste management systems are either undeveloped or non-existent, and as a result, an estimated 70% of waste is mismanaged. And this has negative impacts on socio-economic development, public health, and our climate. And plastic waste, which, as we mentioned, is an area of focus for the climate tech team, is particularly problematic. It's estimated that less than 10% of plastic ever produced has been recycled, and nearly 80% has been put into landfill or the environment. And once in the environment, it chokes waterways, it hurts public health, and affects vital climate processes. And by 2050, the production of virgin plastic could account for 1/5 of the world's oil consumption. So we know that the factors contributing to mismanaged waste are highly contextualized, and they'll vary from country to country and even city by city. But at a high level, what we've seen that this is being driven by a rapid increase in single-use plastic. So this is predominantly packaging material that is discarded minutes after purchase, after just one use. It's also being driven by the fact that waste management and recycling activities, so that includes collection, sorting, and recycling, is still often dominated by the informal sector. There's a limited willingness among municipalities, or often just a lack of budget, to prioritize or pay for waste management solutions. There's low levels of public awareness and citizen apathy on the environmental, economic, and public health risks, indicating a real need for behavior change. There's a lack of or poorly enforced extended producer responsibility policies. So these are policy approaches under which the producers of plastic are given a significant responsibility, either financial or physical, for the treatment or the disposal and collection of post-consumer products. And then finally, there's just low levels of coordination and digitization in the waste management value chain. That leads us on to this next slide. So despite all of these challenges that I've just mentioned, it's clear to us that pathways to a more sustainable and circular future are still within reach. And furthermore, there's growing evidence that digital technologies can help address a range of those challenges and inefficiencies, and support those who are responsible for locating, collecting, segregating, transporting, and recycling plastic and other types of waste. And on this slide, we've highlighted that while there's great diversity in the structure and the scale of plastic recycling initiatives and waste management initiatives, our research found that in most cases, digital technology is being deployed in one or more of the following three ways. First, to improve citizen engagement. Second, to drive operational efficiencies. And then third, to increase transparency. So starting at the top of this slide, the first way that we've seen digital technology supporting waste management is by raising public awareness of why and how to recycle plastic waste, to drive positive behavior change, such as collecting waste management services or segregating your waste, and then also crowdsourcing data to enable citizens to help identify waste hotspots or to quantify waste flows. And these types of solutions can help incentivize recycling and better waste management behaviors. They lead to greater public service accountability, and they also create efficiencies for waste collectors. Mobile solutions, you'll see that we've highlighted some of the digital technologies that we've seen used to improve citizen engagement. And mobile solutions, we think, have a really critical role to play in these types of solutions. But we've also seen the innovative use of technologies like interactive content, satellite drones, and GIS mapping. So second, we've seen digital technology being used to drive operational efficiencies. For instance, using mobile apps to help match waste generators, that could be households or businesses, with waste collectors. In many cases, waste collection is optimized by using mobile apps and mobile payments so that customers can be rewarded for booking a collection service or pay for that service, and also by integrating informal waste collectors into the value chain. Digital tools such as IoT and AI, including machine learning, can also be paired with mobile devices to help organizations optimize collection and recycling activities, and also automate the process of segregating waste. And then finally, we've seen some really compelling examples of how digital tools such as mobile apps, supply chain software, blockchain, and data visualization software can create greater transparency in the supply chain. And this is, I think, particularly important at the moment for the plastic sector, as it can help support this growing movement, which we've called socially responsible plastics, which is where brands and even customers pay a premium for recycled plastic that's been ethically sourced in ways that deliver social and environmental impact. So traceability can support that movement, and it can also help integrate informal and small-scale operations with the more formal, large-scale recyclers and big brands. And it also ensures that everyone in the value chain, especially those informal sector workers, have access to market information and receive fair and decent prices for recyclable waste. So this has just been a quick snapshot of how we've seen digital technology being used across LMICs in Africa and Asia. And I just want to, before I move on, just highlight that we're sure that there are many other exciting ways that technology is being used, whether that's mobile apps, AI, IoT, satellite. We're sure there's lots of exciting ways that these are being used to improve service delivery, and we're really looking forward to seeing these examples through the Innovation Fund and through the application process. So finally, just to end, we've taken these insights, we've taken these lessons we've learned through our research on waste management and on plastic, and we've used these insights to develop the learning agenda and the objectives for the Innovation Fund, specifically for this sector. So I'll just read these off the slide. The four things that we're hoping to do is to develop, to pilot, or to scale digital tools and business models that support the transparency, sustainability, and profitability of waste management services, but also downstream and upstream plastic innovations. So just to clarify, for plastics in particular, downstream innovations, the way that we define it, are innovations that seek to improve plastic collection, sorting, and recycling activities. So these are activities that might use technology to improve citizen engagement, to drive operational efficiencies, or increase transparency, as I mentioned in the last slide. Upstream innovation seeks to prevent problematic and unnecessary plastic from even entering the supply chain. So this might be, for instance, designing products that use recycled plastic, or designing products in a way that ensures that they're easily recyclable. So we're looking at both types of innovations, plastic. Secondly, we want to test how mobile operators and other technology organizations can leverage their digital platforms, their services, and also their expertise to support new recycling and waste management models. We want to identify how improved traceability can increase the commercial and social impact of plastic recycling for all of the stakeholders in the value chain. And then finally, we want to use the Innovation Fund to promote and showcase best practice. So next, I'm going to hand back over to Dulip. It's been great for us to be able to share some of the insights we've collected through our research, but to bring some of these research findings to life, what we really want to do is hear from one of the waste management organizations that we profiled in our report, Clean City Africa, and let you hear a bit more about their experience and how they use digital technology and what kind of trends they're seeing. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Dulip.
Sure, thanks very much, Matt. And as I am about to introduce Michael from Clean City Africa, just to remind you, thanks for posting the questions in the Q&A. Some of the questions are already answered, but we will take some of them up at the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. And as we move in, it's my pleasure to welcome the General Manager of the Clean City Africa project, Michael Munawa. Michael, welcome to the session, and thanks so much for joining. And what we will do is we'll have a quick 2 slides about the program and kind of overview. And while Michael is speaking, feel free, anyone, to post any question on the chat, so we can post it or ask Michael. And also, at the end, I have a couple of questions for Michael too. Over to you, Michael.
Many thanks, and good morning. Thanks for having me. Right. I'm going to a quick background about Clean City Africa, who we are, where we came from, and why we find ourselves in the space where we are currently operating right now. So, by way of background, currently based in Zimbabwe, and we've had 2 very serious cholera outbreaks, one in 2008, and most recently in 2018. So it was during the 2018 cholera outbreak that it was then recognized that one of the key sources or one of the key causes of the pandemic had to do with the amount of waste which was piling out around the cities and proliferation of illegal dumping and illegal dump sites. And we then started to look and say, how could we be more proactive in solving that particular crisis? So it was in response to this that Clean City Africa came into being. The ultimate aim of Clean City Africa is to provide waste collection and disposal services and to divert recyclable waste materials away from the landfills and to prevent leakage into the environment by helping connect the various actors in the value chain. So by the various actors, we're looking at the households, we're looking at the businesses, we're looking at the various entities that generate waste on a day-to-day basis. So like I indicated, the challenge that we'd seen was that there was a challenge from the municipality side of things where waste collection had sort of like come down and in some cases it had actually ceased altogether. But also the fact that by extension, the fact that scheduled collections were not happening as and when they should have been happening, this then led to the illegal dumping. So to try and then mitigate that, we created an app, which is the Via Clean City mobile app, which then allows businesses and households to be matched to waste collectors and to aggregators. So how the application works is that it collects the customer's personal details, that's their location, the estimated amount of their waste, and based on that, it generates a charge. So if I can just quickly talk you through how that works. What happens is that a customer makes a request. The application then interprets the customer location, it interprets the amount of waste, and from that it calculates the total amount of money that is to be paid for collection of the same. The customer then processes the payment through our mobile money platform, currently named EcoCash, and the customer gets some notification once their order has been assigned to a franchise in their zone. One of the things that we really wanted to do was create a very integrated economy, a shared economy, and this was by also coming up with franchisees, and each franchise is then assigned a zone. So as a customer makes a request, the nearest franchisee is allocated the request. This is just to increase the efficiency so that there's not much waiting time from request and to collection. Once the order has been received, the franchise then assigns a driver and a notification is sent to the customer. The driver then receives the order, accepts the order. The driver also has got an app for the same and goes to collect the refuse. And this is the execution of the task. And once the driver gets to within 15 meters of the customer location, they cannot close the job before they get to within 15 meters. This again is to ensure that every request is actually executed and closed off. And once the driver closes off, the customer does the same on their end. They also close off the trip, and then they also give a satisfaction rating so that we continuously also look at the customer experience of things. So like I indicated, this is to make sure that everyone in the value chain benefits. It's a model whereby the fees are then shared between the collectors, who are the owners of the trucks, the franchisees, who are then responsible for the zones, the city of Harare as the municipality, and then by default, they are then the custodian of the residents of the city, the Clean City for platform provision. If you could please move to the next slide. So in terms of an impact, from an impact perspective, Clean City, we see ourselves more of an impact investment rather than a purely commercial entity. 5% of all revenues go into what has been called Community Environmental Services Fund, which covers the cost of continually cleaning of the streets and public places. So every day we deploy over 500 people through the CES fund to make sure that the roads and other public services are actually kept clean. So this is to make sure that we're not just targeting the households and the big waste generators, but also that the environment itself there's a sustainability element, making sure that the cleanliness is then kept up to scratch. Our franchise currently has got over 40 franchises, and collectively, we've created a lot of over 5,000 jobs, the bulk of which are at our material recovery centers. And most of the work at our material recovery centers is done by people who previously worked as waste pickers at places like the landfill sites. At the material recovery centers, all the materials that are collected from the households and from the corporates are then segregated into the various waste categories so that what can be recovered and recycled is then done there at the MRCs, which is short for the Material Recovery Center. And then what can't be recycled is then what winds up going through for landfilling. And through this, we've managed to divert waste that goes to the landfill by as much as 67 to 70%, depending on the particular area. So what that means in terms of our coverage, we're now covering most of the households in Harare. That's over 500,000 households in Harare and its suburbs. More than 60% of these are now our regular customers. And over 50 illegal dump sites have been shut down and repurposed across Harare ever since launch. And we've also started training the households in what we call separating at source. So this means that we're now providing color-coded bins to the various households so that as they generate their waste at source, they can then start to segregate between plastics, glass, paper, biodegradables, and so on into the various color-coded bins. This also, in turn, makes it much easier when we get to the MRCs for the recovery and for separation. The other advantage that we've also seen is that by virtue of being able to track digitally the bulk of the waste producers, we're able to map the waste production hotspots. We now know where the heaviest amount of waste is being generated. And we're also able to provide sustainability reporting for some of the corporates who've got a vested interest in making sure that things are being done in a manner in line with sustainable goals as far as the corporates are concerned. We've also recently launched waste audits, where we now start to audit the waste streams that particular corporates are generating. This is something that we also discovered that most companies are not even aware of what is the nature of their waste. They just know that they throw things away. But in terms of what materials they're actually generating as waste products, with what frequency and to what possible effects, this we're now assisting them through waste audits. For the households, the separation at source, we've got a program which we're calling My Health, My Wealth. And this really, again, speaks to the cholera epidemic, to where we're now saying it's in our interest to make sure that the neighborhoods are clean, the neighborhoods are healthy. Clean neighborhoods are healthy neighborhoods, and that way, that's the wealth element. So maybe if you could move to the next slide. That really, in a nutshell, summarizes who we are and what we do. I don't know, Dilip, if you want to then just quickly go through the discussion questions, or if there are any other questions that have come through on the chat which you'd like me to address at this point.
Sure. Thanks very much, Michael, for taking us through your project, which is really impressive. And as Matt highlighted earlier, so we do have our research and understanding on the kind of theoretical way, but as you provided the details, when it goes into the practical execution of the project, that's when the real problems come up and real challenges come up. So your experience is most valuable for us to understand more on this area. So out of these questions, maybe I thought I'll ask one is or one or two, maybe on the digital trends. How was it implementing kind of a digital solution? What were the key kind of challenges and learnings you had when you kind of implemented this digital solution? If you can take us through the kind of key learnings and what it was like, that would be really great.
I think the customer education is key. We're coming from a background where, for waste management in particular, it's by and large a scheduled service, and trying to get people to then say, instead of waiting for a Monday, for example, for people to come in and collect from you, you can actually, as and when you feel the need, you can actually then make a request, and a truck can then be dispatched to come and collect from your premises. So what we've actually noticed that the uptake was actually quite, we had a bigger uptake in terms of the corporates. By the nature of their operation, they want to keep their premises clean. And it was also in terms of some of our more affluent neighborhoods that we actually started to see an increase in terms of the digital uptake. What also tends to help is mobile penetration, because more and more people are familiar with mobile. More and more people are more familiar with apps, so it was easier to then sell it. Most of our initial adopters naturally amongst the youths, and that's the digital trend that we've seen. So you'll find that the same people who then are quick to download and register on new apps, those were our initial early adopters. But then we had to do a lot of training as well within the neighborhoods to make sure that people managed to sort of like move to instead of being more proactive, instead of waiting for the service to be provided, to start to request it on their mobile devices.
Sure, thanks. Great point. And I think there are two linked questions which I can ask you at once. This is on the Q&A we've got. So were there any other waste collection or management companies at the time you started your project? And also, maybe not directly, but I'll link it together. So when you started, how much time and resources were required to change consumer behavior towards a better waste management?
Okay, I'll start with there were other waste management companies that were there, but they were very small. What we allowed them to do was the challenge and scale up, because by linking it with the MNO, it was then easier to get access to a broader clientele base. So from a customer education perspective, it was easier now to use things like your bulk SMSs. And once again, once you start to promote the use of the app, it was easier to scale up. So we actually did onboard a lot of our franchisees were actually companies that were operating at a very small scale, within the various neighborhoods. But we've managed to then take them on. So, for example, where one company would have been dealing with maybe 2,000 households, by taking them on board as a franchise, they are now able to service 25,000 households. So it really also created an opportunity for these other players in that space to sort of like scale up. And it also then allowed us to quicken in terms of our learning curve, because it was easy for us to adopt some of the lessons that they had already learned by being in that space into our various processes, and also take their lessons as well and integrate them into our mobile app.
Sure, thanks. And on chat, there is a interesting question. What are the incentives for the households to separate and use the service? So why would they separate? And if you can just share about that, that would be great.
Okay, we've put in place a points system, because, like I said, it's a paid service. But once you reach a certain number of points, you then start to get certain discounts on your next collections. So that's the incentive that we've put in. By putting in place a point system whereby once a household schedules a collection and successfully manages to complete an order, they gain a certain number of points, which they can then track for themselves. So we're trying to also catch them young, as it were, because, like I indicated earlier, most of the adopters tend to be within the younger demographic. But what we're trying to do is to also incentivize the households by offering them discounts. So say if you separated source, you gain so many points. If you use color-coded bins, you gain so many points. If you have frequent collections, you gain so many points. So that it becomes cheaper for them to also access the service. So by making it easier and making it more cost effective for the households to access the service, we've started to see greater uptake, especially in the separation at source project, because that has started to grow. It was a bit slow at first, but it's now starting to reach almost exponential stage.
Super. Michael, there are many questions for you, so I'll try to cover them as much as possible. But whatever we can't, when we move to the broader Q&A, feel free to type the answers on the chat as well. So I will combine two questions once again. So one is on, are there situations when a customer logs a request to dispose 2 kilograms, for example, but upon arrival, your team will realize, oh no, there's about 5 kg of waste. How do you handle this situation? And when you collect the waste and afterwards, after the MRC collects it, how easy was it to get the informal sector to get on board to a digital platform? I think this is two questions. One is what happens to the waste once collected by MRC, and how easy was it to get the informal sector on board? I think you answered the second one to a certain extent, but if you can tell us about what happens to the waste after MRC collection, and what if the customer provided information is not accurate?
Okay, in terms of customer accuracy, we did have those particular instances, particularly at first, but by and large, we would then try and negotiate with the customers for the extra bags. It's only in extreme instances whereby someone is maybe put in a request for 2 bags and you get there maybe 20 or 30, and even the vehicle that's gone there is not adequate to deal with that. But customer education has really been key, as well as has been community engagement. Because once the communities also understand that it's in their best interest to send in accurate information, so that we do not do the back and forth. So there was a bit of a learning curve in that particular regard, because waste estimation, I think, at the beginning of the project was not something that most customers were very good at. But with time, you then start to get a sense, like I said, as you get more and more requests from particular areas, from particular neighborhoods, you can then start to map more accurately and say, if one does request for 2 or for 20, then most likely that is what they have. But we did have issues with that, particularly at the beginning, because we're dealing with a lot of backlogs. I think indicated that there were challenges in that particular service provision from across the board. So we did have a lot of challenges there. In some instances, we just had no option but to collect. But with time, we then became a bit more strict about making sure that people put in the adequate number of tonnages, or whether it's bags, and that by means of customer education, we started to really reduce the number of those particular instances. Then in terms of, maybe to answer your question about how easy it was to get the informal sector, I think for us, one of the things that helped has been, from a local perspective, from a local environment, adoption of mobile money has seriously made it easier for people to adopt apps, even messaging apps like your WhatsApp, WeChat, etc. They've made it a lot easier, or they've made people a lot more comfortable with dealing with apps for service provision. So what we then did for the informal pickers was to take a bottom-up approach, where we sort of like then asked them for their input, also to say how can we make life easier for you, and these were some of the features that we then built into that. And even in terms of our coming up with our franchise zones and our geo mapping, it was these same informal pickers who would then assist us in sort of like providing information to say that these are the heavy waste generation areas. This is the kind of waste that you find in area X vis-a-vis area Y. And by them taking all their concerns on board, it was easier to sort of like integrate them into the program as we went along.
Sure. Thanks very much, Michael. Very valid and very important points. There are many more interesting questions, and I have to hand over the task of typing some answers after your session, Michael, just to balance the time. So I have one question for you. Uh, After managing this project for about 3 years, and also highlighting, there are some questions on learning opportunities as well. So I thought link to this innovation fund, and also to cover some of the broader experiences. What advice would you give innovators to make best use of these opportunities, especially like how to work with operators, and how can you use the technology available, and work with these partners. If you can share your broader experience and a bit of advice, that would be great.
I think in terms of for innovators, what I would say is that from operators have got a lot of information. So you find that in terms of the various MNOs, they've got a good sense of where people are. They've got a good sense of population densities. They've got a good sense of uptake in terms of digital platforms. So that again gives you an idea of, as you sort of like move in area by area, how much work you need to do in terms of education. So, for example, if you've got an area where the smartphone penetration is high, the amount of energy, the amount of time that you need to spend on customer education is not as much as an area where mobile uptake is low, smartphone penetration is low. So that information is there within the MNOs because they know who their customers are. They know what their customers use the network for. They know how frequently they use it again. So there's actually a lot of information that can be obtained through partnering with operators because cell phones are by their very nature a very personal device. So there's quite a lot of information in terms of customer usage and the trends that you can pick from there. The other thing that I would also say is that it's very, very important to sort of like make sure that you take a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down. The communities really must be on board from the get-go. The benefits must be clear in terms of the solutions that you're providing into a particular area. The benefits must be clear. When we set up the MRCs, we always make sure that we employ from within the area. Like I said, we actually took a deliberate step to employ the informal waste pickers. We've got a very, very deliberate thrust to making sure that we target previously disadvantaged demographics, such as your women and youth, and these really form the bulk of our workforce. And by taking that approach, it's easier to then gain wider acceptance of the program, and it's easier for innovators to then prepare themselves to scale up, because by targeting those particular demographics, they'll then be best placed to make sure that whatever solutions that they're bringing into communities are taken up, and then they're taken up in large numbers.
Sure. Thank you very much, Michael. As you might see now, there are a few questions on Q&A and a couple of questions on chat. We will ask Michael to kindly reply them on chat. So those who ask questions and others also can see Michael's responses. While thanking you for joining us today and sharing your valuable project with all our partners and attendees. We now move into broader Q&A. So I did see many questions having been posted at the first part of our webinar, and I can see a couple more coming in. So feel free to type your questions using the Q&A now, and we'll try to answer as many as possible in the next 11 minutes. So there were 3 questions specifically asking around e-waste. And if you have a specific e-waste management project, what would happen regarding the fund? So Matt, if you can come off mute and tell us a little bit about that and answer the questions, would be great.
Sure. Can I just check? Can you hear me okay, Do it?
Yep.
Oh, great. So it's really exciting to see organizations interested in e-waste. It's a topic that is important to our team. In fact, if you go on our Climate Tech website, you'll see some resources on e-waste. However, the focus of the GSMA Innovation Fund for Digital Urban Services is on plastics and broader waste management rather than e-waste. So while e-waste is not excluded, it won't take as high of a priority compared to the other kinds of waste management. Hopefully that's clear. If you still have questions, then please do email us. I'll put the email address here. For any questions that we're not able to answer today on e-waste or anything else, please just contact us at gsmaif@gsma.com and we can answer your questions one-on-one.
Sure, thanks, Matt. And we also have our colleagues from the GSMA Innovation Fund. So there are a couple of questions which just has arrived, and if you do have other questions, please post them on the Q&A. And by any chance, if you see your questions were unanswered for some reason, please feel free to repost them so they come up on top. That might make it easier for me to read out as well. So Radhika, if you don't mind me inviting you to answer the question here. We are a UK tech SME with offices, clients and partners in Accra and Nairobi. We have JVs in place. Do we have to be registered in Ghana and Kenya to qualify?
Thanks, Dilip. I can take that one. So to be eligible, we require the entity to be registered and operating in the country of project implementation. However, in cases where service delivery or where you have another partner who's as a downstream partner rather than the lead applicant itself, for example, where service delivery is by a local government, it may be acceptable for the applicant to be registered in a country other than that of project implementation. And this is, of course, only if it's in line with in the eligible country. So I think for this particular case, yes, it is eligible, but if you could please send us a little more information on the GSMA Innovation Fund email address, then we can provide you a definite answer.
Sure, thanks, Radhika. While you're on off mute, can I ask you just to share very quickly? There's a question that's been repeated on the how many African countries to receive this fund? So if you can broadly share, I saw you answer one question as well, but would be great just to get your input while you're here.
Sorry, is this on which African countries are eligible to receive funding?
I feel that's what the question is.
Okay, so we have, I can provide, I've already provided a link to the terms and conditions document. I would encourage everyone to have a good read of this document. It includes all eligibility criteria. And as per this, in section 3 of the terms and conditions, we've said that the only countries who are not eligible for funding are Afghanistan, Burundi, Cambodia, Central African Republic, Chad, Eritrea, Kenya, Iran, Libya, Somalia, and South Sudan. So except for these, all other countries, as per the OECD DSC link provided, are eligible. But yes, I would encourage everybody to look at section 3 of the terms and conditions to be certain of their eligibility.
Sure. Thanks very much for the crisp, clear response. And so similar one, I think this would be same, would cover Radhika's answer as well. But if Radhika, you have to add anything or feel like you want to add anything. Hi, thank you for arranging this session. Kindly, can you please highlight the status of Innovation Fund in South Asia? I would feel, please feel free, Varda, if this is not the same answer. I think Radhika covered which countries are included and also guided you to the link. Radhika, do you feel there's anything else to add here?
Yeah, I think this is the same question, but Varda, if you have anything specific in mind, I would encourage you to just write to us on the email address. But the list of excluded and eligible countries are both provided in the terms and conditions.
Sure. And thanks very much. And Radhika, there's a couple of questions on the chat which I thought I can come to you on. One I thought was particularly interesting. If one were to say that the funding was low, considering the dynamics of the problem, what would you say? I might try to break it down as funding requirement was low, maybe lower than the lowest amount needed. That's how I thought I can break it down. But you can just cover on the kind of funding amounts and any thoughts people had on match funding as well.
Thanks, Dilip. So we will be providing grants between £100,000 and £250,000. We're not looking for applications, I think, below 100,000. So I think the minimum is 100,000. And in terms of matching contribution, the fund requires applicants to provide a match contribution of 25% to 50%, depending on the grant funding requested. Again, details on this particular subject are provided on section 6 and 7 of the terms and conditions.
Super. I see we have 3 minutes for the call, so just maybe one question I'll call out again from the chat. Yeah, so hello, I'm from the Vietnamese German University. We have built a lot of state-of-the-art instruments for shredding plastic separation. Can I apply for funding? Anyone want to, Radhika or Matt wants to take this question, or would you want them to share more details on the email?
Yeah, Dilip, I don't think this is enough information, is it? I think it's just on scope. So maybe if we can take this on email, and if the participant can provide more detail on what exactly and where this project is being planned.
Thanks, Radhika, and also to remind anyone else who haven't asked your questions or had the chance to get your questions answered, feel free to send an email with the details that you want clarified. We will be very happy to answer them. And maybe in the last minute, I saw another question come up, so I'll just see if we can quickly answer this. I run a waste management startup running in India. We currently already working on creating traceability in supply chain. Will the existing work be eligible for the money the applicant needs to provide for their side work? Again, I feel we might need a little bit more information there as well. So yeah, so I think we are right on time, and the questions that you have, we are very happy to provide more information as well. And the team has already typed in answers for those who wanted specific details earlier. And of course, feel free to reach out to us. And just to remind you from Matt's presentation, the important date in mind would be 2nd of July. That's the deadline for your submission of applications. So we look forward to having very interesting dynamic applications with lots of partnership from your side. And do feel free to reach out to us if you have any clarifications. So at saying that, thank you so much for joining us today. Do have a very good rest of the day and stay safe. Thank you very much.